under God, we shall remain. And so, Father, I pray that tonight, that you would bring just a peace that passeth all understanding in this room, God. There's so many concerns. So many, God, that are facing obstacles such as losing a job, court-martial, God, mandatory vaccinations. And so, Father, we just ask for your wisdom in this hour over the church, over your people, over our great nation. And God, I pray that each and every person that walked in with a question tonight, somehow, some way, would get that question answered, either if it's medical, in the teaching, the military, wherever they're serving, God. I pray that you would lead everything that happens tonight. God, we pray blessings upon our nation. We pray that all the attacks against our nation would cease in this hour. And God, evil would be exposed. Righteousness would prevail. And your people, we the people of the United States, would be heard in this hour, God. We thank you. Have your way tonight. In your mighty name, everyone says, amen.
Hi, my name is Kristin. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's really great to see you all here. I feel like right now we're in unprecedented times. We've never seen what's happening in our country, at least in our history, right, of all of us being around here. And therefore, obviously, we need to come together in times like this and share knowledge with each other. I am in hospitals throughout the entire United States on a weekly basis. I go to a new hospital and I'm right there in the front lines with everybody else, asking what they're seeing, gathering information. And I know it's true, there's COVID patients. I don't know how the validity of those tests since the FDA pulled those recently. Hopefully those will get pulled indefinitely. However, what we need to come together and understand is that, first of all, what we're seeing in medicine and in those hospitals isn't the fact that there's so many COVID patients that there are no beds for them. There are no beds because there are no clinicians and nurses to take care of them. Before this all started, we were 1 million nurses short. When this all started and COVID started, all those baby boomers who were nurses left the field. They were not going to stick around for that. That left us even more short. So that has led us to this new agenda that they're talking about, and they claim that there are just the hospitals are overflowing. And the truth is that there are so many beds in those hospitals throughout the entire nation. The truth is that there's just no one to take care of those patients anymore. And what they've done now is place these mandates on the healthcare professionals, on our veterans, on people in several different other industries now. And that's problematic. It's not something that we should ever be coerced to do. We should never be discriminated against us, or anybody should be discriminated against for their vaccination status. And so ultimately, I think that what I would prefer to talk about tonight is what you have as far as your rights. Because a lot of people are turning to me and asking me, well, now what do? We didn't think this was going to happen. What do you mean we're getting this mandated? And a lot of people are already giving in and rolling up their sleeves. I believe in a higher power. I answer to a higher judge, and that name is Jesus Christ. Thank you. So with that, I've also reached out to lawyers. I've been working with my lawyers. I want you guys to know that everything that I say, this cannot be your legal advice because I'm not a lawyer. But I'm going to share with you things that I've learned from my lawyers, and I've asked several questions, and I hope that this then translates and can help each and every one of you. Because that's where we're at right now, unfortunately. Yes, we have a right to exemptions in the United States. Even if you're in Maine and the governor is telling people in Maine right now that there are no exemptions whatsoever, he's going to have to, he's got a big old lawsuit against him right now. Because we have the federal government and our constitutional rights that still protect us against, to protect our exemptions. So if you do have a true medical exemption, please write that medical exemption, get it acknowledged by your healthcare provider. You need to have that. There aren't very many medical exemptions that are being accepted right now. And so additionally, I would encourage each of you to write a religious exemption letter, okay? Under the US Constitution, our federal rights and our state rights, they cannot deny you your religious exemption. And in that letter, what you need to write is that you have a sincerely held religious belief. Go on Google if you need to, if you need help wording it and whatnot, go on Google, look up some religious exemption letters, write your letter. It doesn't have to be extravagant, but show them that you have a sincerely held religious belief, okay? Because then you have legal grounds. And I think that that's what's most important, is that we have something else to fight. There are gonna be people that possibly lose their job, but guess what? If you lose your job, the next step is for you to go to the EEOC. Got that, everybody? That's important. If somebody actually does lose their job for discrimination, regardless, but anyways, and they don't accept your religious letter exemption, then go to the EEOC and file a complaint. There are offices throughout the United States. Go to those offices, and then ultimately they will tell you if you have a case, and you can pursue your company or your school in court, okay? You have to have that, otherwise they're not gonna let you go into any court, okay? So that is extremely important. Sorry, I'm seeing a 15, is that right? Okay, no, it's 10, thanks. Anyways, that is pretty much the most important thing that I've got for you guys. When you guys are filling out those religious exemptions, some of you are having to do it on the computer, and you're having to put information in and answer their questions, and some of their questions are very silly, and they may put in there in wording that if your religious or medical exemption is not okayed and it was denied, then you accept to either lose your job or to get the vaccine. If there's questions like that and they're forcing you to check a box and not write anything in there, and that's the only way that you could submit it, there's other areas on that form where you can write, and you need to write under protest, because that's what's ultimately going to save you your job and give you the right to then come back and challenge them, okay? Again, I hope that this is helpful for people, because this is stuff that I've been dealing with. And I know that, again, people have been asking me, and I just want to share this to the masses. So aside from that, let's say your exemptions are approved. They have to allow you reasonable accommodation by the law. And with that reasonable accommodation, it might not be that reasonable, okay? So what you need to do in that case then, in order to, again, continue on with another lawsuit, because this is what it's about, right? You need to document for 3 weeks. Just listen, do whatever they say. If it's testing with the PCR, stick up your nose twice a week. You need to document each of those, be compliant, just listen, do what they ask. If it's that you can't take your mask off at all while you're on campus, not even to take a drink of water or to eat, document it, because that is not a reasonable accommodation, right? None of us should be subject to not being able to have a drink of water while we're working. So write that, comply for 3 weeks, and then send that into a lawyer. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys my lawyer, who is pro bono. They're fantastic. Liberty Counsel, it's lc.org. If you guys know of any other lawyers, I would love to hear of more that are fighting for us too. But they've been fantastic, and they've definitely taught me personally a lot, and I've been able to help those who are in my circle, essentially. But these are things that, again, we need to do, otherwise we're being coerced into things that we don't want to do, right? And just as going further into that then of things that you need to document are anything that anybody might be harassing you about, things that people might say to you, your manager. I heard a story this week that a manager on a certain unit, it doesn't matter where, what hospital, but she was told that she should just quit her job. Don't leave your job, because then you have no grounds to stand, okay? Stay at your job. They want you to walk, they want you to leave, they want you to just give up, because then they don't have to deal with this, or like people like me. But ultimately, don't leave your job, hang in there, document any discrimination, any harassment, any coercion. Don't listen to the manager that says you should just leave, because if you don't, you're going to not be able to work in a third world country, because we're gonna put a letter on your right to practice and you'll never be able to practice medicine again. Don't listen to that stuff, okay? Ultimately, again, that's pretty much my message that I wanted to share with you all. If you guys do have questions, it's probably something that I've heard on several of the question and answer calls that I've been on with the lawyers as well, so hopefully I can answer those later tonight. Aside from that, just remember that our higher power is Jesus Christ. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Let me all just say thank you. Thank you, Chris Rainey. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you for the church for hosting this, because we have a cure. You know what it is. It's freedom. And I'm so thankful. Facebook, for all its faults, is so fun what you can say in a meme, right? I'm not worried about the Delta because I know the Alpha and Omega. Here's the deal. God had my days numbered before I was ever formed in the womb. Right? And so I'm not going to let the world create this fear and judge my life, and I'm not going to let other people tell me what to do. This is what you're seeing, a very Marxist. I'm supposed to talk about politics. I see my good friend John Jacobsen down there. I think he's probably going to talk about it. We'll maybe overlap. Martin's going to talk about law. So I'm going to try not to get into their areas because they're geniuses, right? I'm a blonde, right? But what you're seeing is political spin. This whole thing has been a psyops, a game of psychological warfare. We believe COVID happened. We believe that people have gotten sick. And for anybody out there who has lost someone to COVID, I grieve with you. We don't take loss of life lightly. We're the people who support life from the womb to the tomb naturally. And unfortunately, because I'm talking about politics, when we were dealing with a very serious crisis like never faced to this country in some decades, when we just handed over our assets in Afghanistan, our resident in the White House decided to chastise governors across this country over mask mandates. Yeah. That tells you what we're dealing with in this nation. Let me tell you, there was an op-ed on masks on Facebook, and it said, and so I'm just kind of taking you through what you need to watch out for, right? Because it's the spin. It's how they make you feel. It's good for the community, the common good. Those are all phrases from the Communist Party. It doesn't take a village. In fact, the first book I felt prompted to write, and I'm sad I did not do it, was in the 90s, and the title was, Have You Seen the Village Lately? It's what I'm protecting my child from. Your children don't belong to anybody else. God gave them to you. You are their advocate, you are their authority, and right now they need you more than ever to stand up for their liberty. So this op-ed said, the title was, Keep Politics Out of the Classroom, Put Masks In. The title itself is political. Masks are political, right? And then she says, I was taught respect. Funny, she's rolling over your liberty and mine with her respect, right? And then she uses fear. She goes back to a school shooting and how we should all care about our kids. Good use of guilt, because you can't dare speak about that or you're heartless, right? And then she topped it off. I can't remember what her last point was, but she topped it off that you just, if you don't get this, you don't care about your community. I'll raise my kids, you raise yours. You don't own my kids, and parents need to stand up, as I said, because your kids are under siege. We are teaching them, I've said this for years on radio, we are teaching our kids in the public schools how to be inmates. Whether it's in an asylum, an institution, or prison. The way they teach them, the way they hold them in line, the way they can't move, they can't have a thought, they have to be in the lunchroom. My husband went to the lunchroom one day and they told him to put his head down because they were all done eating. He looked at the teacher like, are you crazy? But they made all the kids put their heads down. They couldn't talk during the lunchroom, right? That was before COVID, friends. That was 10 years ago. And now they're making them walk. Have you seen the photo where they're walking like this in their masks? You're teaching them how to be captives. This is political. We are under siege, and they're training us and grooming us. I never liked masks because I don't want the government grooming our kids to think government can force women to cover their faces. Which, by the way, in those countries where they cover their faces, they still had COVID. You know what countries didn't suffer from COVID? The ones who allowed HCQ for malaria. We had 5 boards in Iowa who came out, medical boards, who came out in March and again in September with statements that made it difficult for doctors to prescribe it or pharmacists to fill it. I had a pharmacist call me and say, this is during the time when they were closing the meat packing plants. They were euthanizing thousands of hogs every day, which is going to create the food shortage that they want later, right? Because if they can control your food, then they create your fear and then you will follow, right? Oh, can you imagine what this is live, right? Oh, can you imagine? Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to need some new conspiracy theories because mine are all coming true. So just get out the tinfoil hats. But while they were doing that with the euthanizing the hogs and not allowing people into the packing plants, I had a pharmacist call me and he said, I have enough right now to give every employee of a packing plant, they would not have to close it. I have enough HCQ, it is not expensive, I just can't get anybody to prescribe it. Political. It's political. Why? Why are they doing this? Right now in Iowa, are you going to talk about the COVID passport?
Absolutely.
Oh, I hope so. How many of you know somebody who is at risk of losing their job if they don't take the jab? We all hear politicians say how we want people to come to Iowa. We need certain age levels, and I'm telling you the age level they desire, I'm past it apparently, but the 20 to 30 to 40 age, they're leaving. I've had 2 this week who are looking for other jobs. One's already gone because they're being forced to take these injections. And so people are talking about the NERM code. Are you going to talk about the Nuremberg Code? Good, I won't go into it. But use the First Amendment because we knew they were going to approve this, right? We knew they would approve it. It's political. It is your First Amendment. Let me just say this to you, and I am not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV. I'm married to one, and he would tell you, you are all very blessed that I'm not an attorney because I would be suing the pants off a lot of people right now. If we have a First Amendment, which offers you the freedom to express your views, right? The liberty. What is more sacred in expressing your views than what you do and don't do with your body? You have a sovereignty with your body. And your Declaration of Independence tells you that your rights are endowed by your, not delegated by a bureaucrat. So what could be more sacred than what I put or don't put in my body? And if you're going to set this precedent that an employer can demand what someone injects, what else can you set the precedent that an employer can say over his employees? We just went through the Me Too movement. You want to go through this again? Think it through. The Constitution stands, and it stood in a crisis, it stood in a famine, it stood through time, and it will stand in a virus. Even with a 99.xxx survival rate for most groups. We've allowed them to scare our pants off. So I've used that twice tonight. I don't usually use that, and I'm in church, no less. My mother would not be happy. All right, so let me look real quick on some of the notes I wrote for you. There's so much to squeeze into this. Politically, the violations, you saw them, I saw them. It's just a couple weeks. It's just a mask. It's just a shot. Wearing is caring. See all these phrases that they say? The spin that they do? Tracing here. Is anybody going to talk about tracing or tracking? Naomi Wolf, a Democrat. I don't know who she is, but she's a Democrat in the digital tech ed departments, and she's warning if we do the tracing and the tracking, it's the same programs that the CCP in China uses to track their people, in which they can find their dissidents in a matter of minutes. Think it through. It's unconstitutional. They do not have the right to track or to trace. And you certainly should have the right to know when they are. All right? Violations. Your church had to be closed, the casino was open. The boutiques could not sell. Baby clothes, but the big box stores had thousands walking through. Right? You saw all that. Nursing homes. Are you guys going to get into nursing homes? Oh, thank you. I interviewed, if you want to go to Truth for Our Time Facebook page, Truth for Our Time Facebook page, I interviewed John Eidsmoe. He's a constitutional attorney with a really long list of credentials. And in it, we talked about the nursing homes. It was criminal, folks. It was the PSYOPs. If you work with euthanasia, I've gotten to go to several seminars to fight euthanasia and assisted suicide. And you know who wants assisted suicide, who volunteers for it? It's not people who are in pain, it's not people who are terminal, it's those who are lonely, in despair, hopeless. What did we just do to our elderly last year? We separated them from their family, and if you've worked around the elderly, you know they need familiarity. They blame themselves, they wonder what they've done wrong. You now have family members who weren't allowed to be with their loved ones and they passed. There will be emotional wounds that people will deal with for time to come. Why are they doing this? I happen to believe it's a global reset. I'm not going to say that, I won't even get into the COVID, how it came from, where it is, what it is. But who was it that said never let a crisis go to? And boy, did they jump on well. You saw the impact on our election. We had to have new poll workers. Because most of our poll workers are elderly. They're senior citizens who volunteer. Well, they wouldn't get out because that was going to be dangerous for them. So we had new people who didn't know the process. So then a lot of things were allowed to take place that hadn't always taken place. We had mail-in ballots. We had ballot harvesting. We had all kinds of situations in states across America. Am I the only one that thinks that the election was a mess? No. You're not alone. And I was pleased when I was just at the RNC a week ago to hear people in leadership say they're gearing up to do it again. At least they recognize it and we're working to fight it. It has to be fought at the state level. We do not have a federal election. We have a federal office, but it's state-controlled elections, and that's what you need it to stay. Imagine if DC were calling the shots. They're trying with H.R. 1. You need it to stay local. You need local control. It's political. Oh my goodness, what else? Let me just say the global reset. Who hurt worse with this? Small business. What's the problem with small business? Because you're not dependent on somebody else. You don't have to march to the drum of your employer. You don't have to follow their rules. You don't have to take their jab. You can be independent and you can think you're a problem. What happens when you lose small business? You lose the middle class. We will have the haves and the have-nots. See, what makes America great, Jane Robbins writes about it in her book. I can't think of the title. It's about the administrative state. But she says, what makes America great is in America, the people have power because they all have rights. But what the left and the oppressive progressionists are trying to do is that the right people will have the power. That's what this is about. Healthcare. I'm so glad to hear that speaker. Hospital beds were empty, not because they were empty while they were telling us how overcrowded they were, right? But now these people we called heroes a year ago are now being blamed. You all did a protest today. Thank you so much for doing that protest. Thank you. I did one last week. I'll be doing another one. I've got family members who are dealing with this, who are at risk of losing their jobs. And to hear legislators, and these are my friends, I'm the Republican National Committee woman, these are my friends, but to hear them say, if you don't want to get the jab, you may lose a job, that's easily said until it's your education that you invested years and money in, or you have a unique situation where you've got a talent and a skill that there's not that wide of a career field, or you've got a mortgage to pay, or you're going to lose your insurance, you could lose your marriage, it could destroy your family. Think it through. Same legislator said, if this is abused, we'll come back. How many of you think it's abused? How many think it's time to revisit it? How many of you know who is your legislator? How many of you written and called? Keep it up. Keep it up, do not relent. Do not relent. You need to call them, you need to phone them. They've got to handle this, in my opinion, at the next special session that's coming up this fall for the census. And frankly, until you do deal with this, the rest of us have too much to worry about, to be concerned about your census. You are in control, You are the grassroots. It's we, the people, all right? And here's what makes a difference. 2 Corinthians 3:17, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Our Declaration of Independence was founded upon liberty. Read the other verses around that, because it's a hoot. It talks about the veil on the face and being removed when there's liberty. What a hoot, right? Like God knew what he was doing. For me, all legislation has to pass this, because our Constitution came from this. Then it has to pass this, and we have trampled all over it. As National Committee woman, then it has to pass this. But after this, you have to decide if it's a good idea, a bad idea, or if it's government's job at all. Medicaid is part of the problem. They're controlling us by the Medicaid. We hear that's why they had to do the exemption. And frankly, legislators are passing off, it's a dereliction of duty to pass off what is theirs, what they're elected to do, to another branch or to somebody else. It's time they take it back. I think, am I up with my time? I am up. Thank you all so much.
Do I need that or this? Okay, thank you for being here. Can everybody hear me all right? All right, as Pastor said, my name is Martin Cannon. I'm one of several senior counsel with the Thomas More Society. It's a national public interest law firm dedicated to the protection of life, religious liberty, and other things. Very recently, we have been completely swamped and focused on free speech issues. Now, with respect to the vaccine that we're here to talk about tonight, not so much the vaccine, but the pressure to take it, you have to understand the legal groundwork. And I'm going to try to make this quick because we've got a special speaker here who's under some time pressure and I want to get to him. But everybody in this country kind of understands that you are not supposed to discriminate. It's illegal or something like that. The problem is discrimination, which actually used to be a good word. You know, we used to say, oh, he's very discriminating, and that was a compliment. It's still a good thing for people to be discriminating, and that's what we have to be able to be with respect to this virus. We have to have information, we have to study, we have to make up our own minds, and that's what's gotten short-circuited here completely. But in any event, discrimination is largely legal. The problem we have with the vaccine and the pressure to take it is that the legal protections for the people who don't want to take it are frankly not very satisfactory. Under the law, you can discriminate as an employer or as a college or anything you want. You can discriminate against a person because he's a redhead or because he's a Hawkeye fan. It's not illegal. You can refuse to hire somebody for just about any reason if you don't happen to like him. The only things you can't discriminate on are a few things that have been set forth in the law upon which discrimination is specifically prohibited. Race and sex and religion. You know, you've heard all that. But those are the only things. Vaccination status is not one of those things. So the best use of the law that allows for some objection and exemption to the vaccine is medical stuff, which is fairly common, and it calls into question the Americans with Disabilities Act and whether you're disabled and your activities of daily life are affected and all that. But probably for the purpose of this group here, the other thing is the protection against religious discrimination. Most people, most Christians, most conservatives, a lot of liberal people have real problems taking this vaccine. Their instincts just say, I don't think I want to do this, it doesn't seem right. But they have only vague ways of casting that in religious terms. So it's pretty important to be able to do so. And I'll talk very quickly, if I can, in a minute about how to do that. But very importantly, when you raise an objection under the Civil Rights Act that gives you the religious exemption, your employer is required to make reasonable efforts at accommodating your religious beliefs. That means they have to talk to you about it. The law says they have to have the conversation with you, and that law is intended to protect you from your employer kind of giving a rubber stamp denial and making no serious effort to accommodate your beliefs. So that's good, right? But if you look at these forms that we're seeing pop up everywhere, they have kind of a different flavor. And the risk in that mandatory conversation is that the employer actually is sort of trying to determine whether your religious beliefs are legitimate. And obviously that should make people uncomfortable. You shouldn't have to pass a sniff test. In fact, in my opinion, you shouldn't have to have a religious basis at all if you're reluctant to take the vaccine. But very importantly, under the law, your religious rights that are protected are the best tool we have. And it's not really a very good tool. It's kind of a square peg in a round hole when it comes down to the vaccine. In any event, if you want a good way to articulate the religious basis for objecting to the vaccine, I could go through it here, and I'll try and do it quickly, but in the back of the room somewhere, there's 20 or 30 copies of a statement that I drafted that should be acceptable to people of any Christian faith that help put objections to the vaccine, which maybe don't appear to be religious at first blush, into religious terms. And that helps to kind of fit that peg into the hole. And if you use that statement on an objection to the vaccine on a form, you can add it as another page or just write it yourself or whatever. Your prospects for success in court, if you get there, are better. So I only made 20 copies. They're on the table in the back somewhere. Grab one on your way out the door and make use of it. If you don't get one and you want one, yeah, we'll put it on the Free Speech America website and it'll be available to you. Now, very quickly, what are those religious grounds? They tend to revolve around Jeremiah. Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. God speaks harshly and deals harshly with people who misuse that temple, who use it for purposes, and think of what was going on there, purposes that distract from His purposes, that deny His glory, that invite sin, that lower Him from His position of dominance in our lives, that reduce our trust in Him and replace it with trust in man, that corrupt the relationship we have with Him. Our duty to God, being His temple, is to use our bodies and our reason, which He gave us, in ways that please Him. For that purpose, He gave us a conscience, and our conscience can raise fair questions about the virus. We don't like abortion. Abortion is evil. Vaccines, including these vaccines, derived from, have been made from, have been tested with cells from aborted babies. Some people will say, well, that was in 1970 that tissue came along. It doesn't matter to a person, doesn't have to matter anyway. And the other thing is that fetal cells, new ones, are still being used regularly in the vaccine business. Secondly, unlike other traditional vaccines, this vaccine, many vaccines, operate at a genetic level that can make people uncomfortable. The genetic process is fantastically beautiful and complex. It is something that only could have been created by God, can only be understood by Him, and our understanding of it is very, very poor. When we do what we're doing with these vaccines, we are tinkering with something we don't understand. And it makes me think of the mice that live in the wing of the 747, and they figure out a few things about it, and they think they can fly the damn thing. My conscience tells me that I must preserve my health and not endanger it. There is evidence that's worthy of being considered that the vaccine can be dangerous also. On the whole, it may be that the thing is largely beneficial, but each individual should still be able to make his choice. Importantly, your conscience, to be properly used, must be informed. It is your duty to inform yourself as part of making decisions that are of significance like this. Under the current circumstances, when there are too many unanswered questions and information is not freely flowing and it's not being debated accurately, or I should say adequately, accepting the vaccine can be considered a morally reckless act. Now, those are the things that I propose as religious objections. From a practical standpoint, there's another thing that isn't getting talked about. under our laws, historically, you have the right to defend yourself from bodily harm. You even have the right to defend another person from bodily harm. But you don't have a duty to take risk upon yourself to defend the other guy. You can defend him if you want, but if you stand there and watch, and I always hate that when people do it, but if you stand there and watch while a guy gets hurt and you could have defended him, you still have no liability. We don't impose a duty on you to undertake danger for the protection of others. And yet that may be what we're being asked to do here with the vaccine. So finally, the solution to this is not a legal one. We have Title VII, and it's a square peg, round hole problem. The solution here is political. There are huge numbers of people who feel like they're getting pushed around. If they all act with the understanding that all the rest of them are out there and are going to act the same way, you'll have your effect. A hospital isn't likely to fire 30 or 40% of its workforce. It'll tell them they're going to get fired, and they'll all line up to get the vaccine. But if they all understood that they could act together and call that bluff, they win. So do it. Even when you don't see the other thousands of people, know that they're out there and talk to them, get the word out. Everybody who doesn't like getting pushed around on this issue needs to know there are others like him. A fella who thinks he's alone is much more likely to capitulate. So don't. As a lawyer friend of mine just a few days ago said, it's time we stood up and started acting like Americans. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Lou Safranek. I've known Dr. Safranek for 30 years or better. I consulted him on a very significant case years ago where I needed an infectious disease specialist, and I learned that his thought processes are absolutely critical. Lou is wearing a mask because the position he's in has him taking absolutely no risks. I hope you can understand him through it. But he's here to tell you a few things about the vaccine, the pros and the cons, and so forth.
I hope everyone can hear me through the mask. Yes, okay. Hey, Martin asked me if I would say a few words, and I have to pick my son up here at 8:30, so I'm going to get right to the point here. First of all, let me make clear, I think I'm in agreement with most everybody here. I'm opposed to mandates. I'm not opposed to the vaccine, but I am opposed to mandates that we get the vaccine. The common good requires that we do look out for one another, but there's more to the common good than saving lives. We live in a country where the ability of Americans to make their choices, to live the lives they want, to undertake the activities they want has been sorely limited, and at the present time, my view is that the mandates, rather than in any way bringing us together, are only further creating serious division, and rather than aiding the common good, they're actually causing the common good to deteriorate. So if we're actually looking out for this as a country, we may lose some lives from folks who are coming down with COVID, but there are larger issues confronting how this country works and how we come together and work together that are not being furthered by mandates like this. Now, secondly, I'm not a strong central government person, and if we genuflect and allow the central government to dictate whether or not individual Americans have to take a mandate or not, we're creating a pathway for continuing invasions into individual lives. And so this is, we're setting a precedent here, which is important for the generations that come after us. Finally, I would say that it would be one thing if we were strictly following the science here, but this is not entirely a matter of following the science. We have issues here people who have already had the infection have excellent immunity, and to force these people to undergo vaccination seems to me to be silly. So from my view, we've moved beyond follow the science to just follow your orders. And we need to get beyond that. Now, I do want to say just a few words about the vaccines. I'm also generally a pro-mask person, but hopefully we can all come together here, mask or no mask. The vaccines, why should persons consider not undergetting the vaccine? Let's look at it that way. I think there are a number of things. There is good evidence, and I'm not going to deny this, there's good evidence that the vaccines are of some benefit. And I'm non-judgmental about the vaccines. A lot of people are scared. There are some frail and sick people out there, and folks who are trying to get every bit of protection they can are going to resort to the vaccine. And I have no objection to these people getting that. Many of us have ethical concerns, deep-seated ethical concerns about the vaccine, which are sufficient justification for any of us to reject the vaccine should we choose. There are documented side effects already seen with the vaccines that may persuade some of us that those are risks we don't want to take. We also, some of these are novel vaccines, and we don't know what the potential future side effects are. So between the recognized side effects and the unknown ones, there's some justification for people to choose that they're not going to get the vaccine. The vaccines are imperfect. Folks, right now, literally, I am seeing folks with COVID from dawn to dusk. When I leave here after I pick my son up, I have 4 patients whom I've never met, hoping I'm going to call them tonight and take care of them as outpatients. And I'm just going to say, as an aside, anybody here who comes down with COVID, call me. We'll get you taken care of, okay? The vaccines are imperfect. I would say about 1/3 of the patients that I'm seeing right now who come to me with COVID have been vaccinated already, fully vaccinated. So it's clear that the vaccines are providing imperfect protection. And as you know, they're already recommending boosters for some people. I suspect that pretty soon they're going to have to own up and confess that everybody should get a 3rd booster. Or are we up to the 4th booster now, Martin? Somewhere in there. So the vaccines are imperfect. I'm confident that some people here have had the vaccines. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But you can still come down with COVID. You can still die from COVID, even if you've had the vaccine. They are imperfect. Finally, one other reason why you might choose not to get the vaccine, many folks here who are younger, in good health, even if you get it, you're going to survive. Are there some survivors of COVID here? Whoa, okay, fine. So even if you get COVID, the overwhelming majority are going to survive, even if you're in your 90s. And everybody's going to, well, I'm not going to be that cocky. Your odds are even better of surviving if you can find your way to me. I do think this is a manageable disease. I can't make folks well overnight, but as Martin mentioned, I'm approaching 300 patients. Nobody's died. Nobody's ended up on a ventilator. But I do want to say, folks, that there are some people very sick. Some people don't get to me at a at an early time, and they end up in the hospital, and we struggle with some of them, and I don't need to recall to you the body counts that the world has experienced this year. So this is not to be taken lightly. But most will survive, and I think there are medical treatments, increasing numbers of medical treatments, which will guarantee that folks with COVID will get through this. And so if your choice is treatment versus taking the vaccine, you have reasons to be optimistic that treatments will be available to help you through this. I could take a question or two.
Well, you say there are options for civilian doctors. Last November, I called my doctor, stay home, make sure you're sick, and if you're sicker, go to the emergency room. Called them again in May, and I get ivermectin. We've never heard of it.
Yeah. No, I acknowledge that, folks. You're welcome. Martin, whoever's in charge here, could give out my number when this is over, and you can call me and we'll get you taken care of if you come down with this, or you have friends or loved ones who come down with this.
The name was given to me, and I appreciate that. If I get sick, I'm probably coming. There's a lot of doctors.
No, the establishment medical community will not treat this unless you're sick enough to be in the hospital. There's been very little attempt made to approach patients before they get to the hospital sick as stink. But I've taken exactly the opposite approach for myself this past year. No, folks, there are, and there may be more variants that come out. The current one is very contagious. Let me just say, I will be very grateful if the Lord is smiling on us and not one patient in this room comes down with COVID as a result of it. Praise the Lord if that happens. But the current strain appears to be quite contagious, and those of you who haven't already had COVID are going to be at some risk of this. So get my name from Martin or whoever's running the show here, and let me try and be of some help to you if you're a COVID patient.
Can we discuss hydrochloroquine, CPAP, vitamin D and A, zinc?
Okay.
Why or why not?
Yeah. Okay. Folks, I'm not going to go into specific treatments here, okay? I'm not a big vitamin advocate, though. Neither do I poo-poo them. I will say that about 2/3 of the patients who come to me, often I have the husband, the wife, and on the third seat of the couch, there's a grocery bag full of minerals, vitamins, and supplements. And I tell folks, as long as they can take the medications which I recommend to them, I have no objection to their dining on the stuff in the grocery bag there. But I'm not sure of how much benefit they are. A lot of patients have been taking these for weeks or months, and they're still sitting in front of me with COVID.
So is the hydrochloroquine pure and used as
Okay. A year and a half ago, when I was asked what, if anything, could be done, there was not much out except the hydroxychloroquine at that time. And I did suggest to doctors that they try it, and some of them thought it was quite effective. I have not used hydroxychloroquine myself for COVID. I think it's probably of some benefit if you do get it. I haven't prescribed it myself. But it is an available drug. I've used it any number of times through my career, or the related drug chloroquine for treatment of malaria, but not much malaria around here.
Is the inoculation the only cure?
Well, folks, there's no cure for this. If you come down with it, your own body's going to cure you. You're going to make tremendous amounts of antibodies, and you're going to be cured. Unfortunately, there's a subset of people who in the second week of the infection, everybody survives the first week of COVID. So you come down with it, you've got headache, fever, count 7 days. Everybody survives the first week. Nobody goes to the hospital. It's in the next 7 days that there's a subset of people who become gravely ill with COVID. So it's a 2-week illness, and if you're going to get really sick, it happens in the second week. And a lot of that is due to the body's own reaction to the virus. I tell people it's like a bee sting. You know, everybody has gotten a bee sting at some point, almost everybody. You get stung, it hurts, it swells up a little bit. Mom brings you some ice, you put it on it. The next day you're chasing yellow jackets again. But as you know, there are certain people who in the hours or minutes after a bee sting, they actually have life-threatening reactions that put them in the hospital. There are deaths every year from this. COVID is a little bit like that in that you survive the virus, but it's your own body's reaction to the virus that makes people so sick in the second week. And you actually have to control the reaction, not so much the virus. We have to bring that reaction under control and prevent other complications in that second week. Pardon? No, you won't find out if you have the Delta virus. I don't know if any of my patients have had the Delta virus. The laboratories know, but they don't relay that information back to the physicians, and it's not really relevant. You can't, the laboratories know how much of the coronavirus that's circulating is Delta or not, but it doesn't make a big difference, except from the point of view of the public health people. From the point of the individual, it doesn't make much difference. Yeah, it looks like you're likely to have excellent immunity for at least a year. And if you invite me back in a year, I'll tell you whether it's 2 years. Folks, I'm gonna sign off. I could stand here and I'd love to, in a safer time or a different place, talk longer about this, but stand up against mandates, and call me if you come down with COVID.
Stay up here, Lonnie, for a second, because what Pastor Parton says is true. And we go back 10 years ago, and there was a group, and it involved that man there, Lonnie Parton. It involved Chris Ranney. It involved Terry and Jim Cole, Bill and Dee Crum, Pastor Nathan Sherrill, Martin Cannon, that formed this first group called Bluffs IA, which made an effort, as Martin said earlier tonight, the solutions to some of these have to involve the political element. And these folks began a trek in 2011, starting on a fetal pain bill that has resulted in 5 pro-life bills being passed by the Iowa legislature and signed by the governor. Southwest Iowa was the leader to propel that. It's an honor to be here tonight. Many of us are bitterly opposed in Des Moines. I'm going to talk about this because time is somewhat limited. But one thing that I say to my friends on the left, who are very inconsistent about their tolerance, I say, so, my body, my choice. Does that not apply to us or just to killing babies? Yevgeny Yushchenko said, when truth is replaced by silence, then silence becomes the lie. So we're not going to be silent tonight about what's going on. A great woman named Catherine once said, I am tired of silence. I am tired of being told to be silent. Cry out with 1,000 voices. The world is rotten because people are silent. Let's talk about what's going on. Several of us in the Iowa legislature in April foresaw all of this coming down the pipe. I introduced 2 amendments in April. 2. One to our Judiciary Committee, majority Republican, of which I'm a member of that party. Another to our entire Republican caucus. The first bill was to do those protections that Martin alluded to. I said that we must embrace and absolutely glom onto the protections under ADA, EEOC, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of '64, the religious exemption, and my personal research showed 52, Title 21, USC, Chapter 9, Subchapter 5, Part E, Section 360, BBB, 3E, 1A2, 3, concerning non-FDA approved drugs. Do you know that we have a federal statute that says you cannot force anyone to take a non-FDA approved drug? Thus the rush to get this FDA approved today, as you saw. The second, and of course, in the Judiciary Committee, of which comprises basically 23 members, I had 4 votes, including mine. 2 Republicans, Wheeler and Salmon, and a Democrat, Brian Meyer. They voted it down. And the reason they voted it down is because they get a lot of lobbying money from all the healthcare corporatists and all the other big businesses. And then I went to our Republican caucus with an even better amendment weeks later that basically says no employee in the state of Iowa shall be forced to take any vaccine. And my own Republican caucus voted that down bigly. And as a matter of fact, at the end of my argument, one of my confreres in the caucus said, "Oh, I just got a text from the governor's office. If Jacobsen's amendment passes, we're vetoing the bill." Guys, the problem isn't just the Democratic Party, it's the GOP establishment that are married and whoring around for money, filthy mammon, filthy lucre. That's what's going on here. And guys, Tamara Scott, who is in this building tonight, who spoke, our GOP National Committee woman, she has been persecuted, isolated, and marginalized herself because she is standing with we the people on this. I want you to know that. She's been very, very courageous on this. We have to put pressure. You know, the Republicans are in charge of the Senate, the House, and the executive branch. We have to put pressure on Republican leadership to do the right thing, to add this as an agenda item on the special session that's already going to be held anyway in September or October. It's far more important than gerrymandering our lines to get reelected. We need to help the people and put this on the agenda. Now let me tell you what I'm going to do in that special session. First of all, I formally call for that as an included agenda item in the special session. I have 16 fellow evangelical Christian conservative caucus members that are solidly with me on this. We've been working on this every hour of every day. The threads are voluminous since the session ended. There are 16 great, courageous people. Now, we can't always get 51 votes, but you know, with 59 Republicans minus 16, there's not a majority to carry the day. And what I am prepared to do, if this is not added to the special session or concomitant right after the special session, we're going to vote down every map until we get to the third map and introduce amendments on the floor to solve this vaccine passport issue. And if they will not let us introduce that on the floor, I'm going to stand up as a point of personal privilege. I will find a privileged motion under Robert's Rules of Order and Mason's Law, and I will introduce my amendment on the floor to ban all vaccine passports. And if they rule me out of order or non-germane, I'm going to ask for a suspension of the rules and a roll call vote to separate the wheat from the chaff. We will know who's with us and who's against us. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter and a 1-year-old granddaughter. They live in Kansas. You don't know how free we are here in Iowa. Kansas, old Alf Landon, the sunflower state. They've got a leftist Democrat governor. And you know, Fauci wants to mask 3-year-olds. People say, John, why have you lost so much weight this summer? My answer is, because I got to be in good enough shape to put up a fight, because if they try to put a mask on my 3-year-old granddaughter, they're going to have to come through me to do it. I am drawing a line in the sand. Masks for little children is child abuse. If you follow me on Facebook, if you follow me on social media, I posted 44 articles that masks are harmful medically and psychiatrically for little children. There was just a recent study released, a compendium of 15 studies that show that masks are useless for children in this crisis. This is absolutely insanity, what we are doing. So, we're trying to nip this vaccine passport, and of course, we're going to have to shore up language on the masks because the mayor of Iowa City found a loophole and is ordering everybody in Iowa City to be under masks. I mean, think about it. We're now in a state, we're decrying what's going on in Afghanistan and what's going to happen to these little girls. They're going to be back in burqas and veils while we're insisting that our little girls are all masked. We are decrying the tactics of the Taliban, as we should, for emulating behavior that they did in Germany in the 1930s. And yet, we're violating the own Nuremberg Code that we signed as a nation that has a death penalty for war criminals. And of course, I agree with Dr. Safranek, you know, this Delta virus is really clever because it knows not to attack Obama and his Epstein buddies at the super spreader event up in Massachusetts, right? But if we gather together at a Garth Brooks concert, you know, we're all bad. But Obama and the Epstein folks at Martha's Vineyard, they can party on. How about the fact that Joe Biden has deliberately allowed in 2 million people at the southern border, roughly half of who have COVID, Delta variant? If this were that terrible, then either he is totally derelict in his duty by allowing that fatal of a disease in the United States, or the Delta variant fatality rates aren't as high. Has anyone seen the Delta variant fatality rates lately? It's because no one's dying from Delta variant. Most viruses, will always mutate into a more contagious but less lethal dosage. Look at Israel. Israel has the highest population that is vaccinated. They're up around 90%. They have the highest incidence. You know, they said here, well, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then we just want to get to herd immunity. Folks, over 90% of our 65 plus in the United States are already vaccinated. They've been as protected as you can be based on the medical science we have. Over 90% of our 65 plus. 75% almost of all adult Americans have been vaccinated against this. Why the obsession with making every single one of us bow and scrape when we know that those who've had COVID are at risk, if they've already got antibodies in their system, to getting the vaccine shot too early after having COVID. And yet in workplaces, there are no exceptions for people who've had COVID, who have the antibodies, and who for their own health and protection can't get that virus. I have a physician friend. He's on our radio show often. He does work for 4 medical missionary groups, including Franklin Graham's group. He goes to Latin and Central America. When he got his yellow fever shot, he got partial Guillain-Barré paralysis. His physician told him, "Doc, you cannot get this vaccine, you will end up paralyzed." We know there are women who are pregnant that if you look at the data, the miscarriage rates are sometimes 800% higher if you've taken it. We know that young people, again, why the obsession with inoculating all of the young people? We know that young people, young males, young females, college age, they're getting myocarditis, they're getting blood clots. You have to do a cost-benefit analysis. Now, my mom's 85 years old. She got vaccinated, okay? But this obsession with vaccinating healthy young people, it does not make sense. But think about what's happened here. Go back to Fauci a year ago. To create and manufacture a vaccine in the United States legally, you have to prove that nothing else works. Why the poo-pooing of hydroxychloroquine? Why the poo-pooing of ivermectin? Folks, there's like 300 hydroxychloroquine studies. These are medical studies. I can show you afterwards. There's 100 on ivermectin. Ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine protocols work. Fauci allowed a paper to be published years ago that said hydroxychloroquine is effective against SARS coronavirus. But you know what? If you could poo-poo the cheap, plentiful stuff, then you can move on to vaccine manufacturing. Have you looked at the various charts on vaccine reactions? If there wasn't liability total protection for these drug companies, they'd already be out of business because of the lawsuits. Do you know that Myrna is not a vaccine? It scientifically is not a vaccine. It had to be classified as a vaccine in order to get the legal liability protection. Do you know that as of a couple of weeks ago, on a conference call I was on talking to hospital officials in eastern Iowa who were forcing their employees to get the COVID shot, I said, are you now finally using hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin protocols in your treatment plans? They said, nope, it's not in our plans. This is the first time that medicine has been so politicized that literally who you choose as your physician or hospital may mean whether you live or whether you die. There has been criminally negligent, bordering on manslaughter, decisions to totally fail to treat anybody. And how's that working out for ex-Governor Cuomo, who banned prophylactic administration of hydroxychloroquine? We know how his hospitals ended up. There were 5 Democratic governors who made it illegal to prescribe hydroxychloroquine. A doctor told me the other day there are still people who will not prescribe Regeneron, which is the monoclear therapy that President Trump got that cured him. They're not prescribing it to people because Trump got it. This is hateful, this is diabolical, and it has to stop. You know, Tamara did the meme world, and you can't make some of this stuff up. But think about it. Think about this. For the first time in history, we can transmit a disease we don't have to those who are immunized against it. Remember, at no time in history have the people forcing others into compliance been the good guys. Friendly reminder, your body does not belong to your employer, your school, or your government. Here's a great one. Fully vaccinated man dies of COVID. Doctors claim the result could have been worse if he did not have the vaccine. I kid you not. I kid you not. Imagine having a 99.999996% chance of not getting cancer, but being forced to get on chemo just in case.
You on my Facebook page?
Probably pulled it from you. Natural immunity is strong and may last longer and broader than the vaccine. 50 years of virology tells us this. So if the shot works, why is the shot not working? If it worked and was safe, you wouldn't need it to run huge ad campaigns, mandate it, or offer incentives. If it worked and was safe, you wouldn't need to block, censor, and threaten those who question it. Folks, the science is on our side. Why was Facebook last year blocking all my posts on hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, when now the studies show You know, miraculously, when Joe Biden got inaugurated, the federal government discovered, hey, that stuff works after all. Shazam. So what we need to do, you know, Iowa is one of the 5 freest states in the nation. Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, Florida, and half of Texas. Now, listen, this is so sinister. You know what they did in Texas? I'm a lawyer. We have people in Dallas that we work with. And Governor Abbott signed a law indicating, Yolanda, I'm probably done here, I just can't read that in my eyes. So Governor Abbott signs a law saying no mask mandate. All of a sudden there's this headline in the paper about a week and a half ago, I think you saw it. Judge rules Abbott's mask ban wrong in state's mask ban in Dallas County, Texas. You know what the story of that is? The county supervisors there, the Democrats, the liberals, didn't like Abbott's mask ban. So what they do there, our county supervisors here aren't even this creative. In Dallas County, Texas, the county supervisors created their own court. It's the court of the Board of Supervisors. Now, they didn't tell the Supreme Court of Texas that, you know, and they appoint and pay their own judge. Okay? So they instructed their court judge that's salaried through their county supervisors to write that opinion. Had no force of law, but the Supreme Court of Texas still had to step in because all the businesses were so confused. Okay? You have many, many with you on this. But the problem is big money in Des Moines. You know, Donald Trump says Washington, D.C. is a swamp. And people say, is Des Moines a swamp? I say, well, it's really unfair to compare it to a swamp because a swamp is its own self-contained ecosystem. Des Moines is a sewer because the sewer is where all the rats live. And big money right now, big corporations that want to rule your lives, and big health care that wants to direct everything that they want to, and us just be vassals and serfs in the feudal hierarchy, nothing to see here, go along, go along. They're blocking this. You know what? I've got 16 right now in my House and another 8 in the Senate that signed that letter to the healthcare practitioners in Iowa. We asked them a bevy of questions. They didn't respond. You know why? Because they're wrong, and we're on the side of science. They're not. Read that letter that we wrote. But we need to put the heat on the GOP and the leadership and tell them to knock off worrying about re-election and gerrymandering maps and sucking with a vacuum cleaner all the donor dollars in. And for crying out loud, stand up for the people, our liberty, and our U.S. Constitution. Thanks be to God for his protection thus far. May Jesus Christ reign in our hearts and in our land. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
So someone asked about the names and contact information for the representatives in the state of Iowa. 2 things on that. All of that contact information is on freespeechamerica.org website right now. There's also hard copies in the lobby that if you'd like to get a copy of those on your way out, there's copies on the table, information table in the foyer. Representative Jacobsen, you mentioned about, and I think you just mentioned this real quickly, but it was a comment about the governor vetoing legislation on, was that the passport? This question has to do with that, about her signing an executive order to stop businesses from firing employees who do not vaccinate. Can you comment?
Right. What happened initially was that the governor's office said they would not support my April bill to totally protect employees from vaccine passports. I think at this juncture, she's in general been very supportive of freedom in Iowa, obviously, as we're one of the freest states. Here's how I would answer the executive order question. It's a great question. To the extent that the governor aggressively used her emergency powers granted by the legislature
to do such things as even close churches and businesses for a portion of time in Iowa. If she maintained that aggressive stance in the use of her emergency powers, I think she could certainly attempt to issue an executive order. All this will get fought out in court, but I encourage her to try every avenue that she can to do that. And I think an EO would speed up the process, much so, because we're going to have a lot of trouble persuading people to have this added as a special session item. To have a special session, you either have to have it called by the governor, or you have to have 60% of each legislative body in the alternate call that special session. And right now, the question is, will they add it as an agenda item to the one that's already planned for redistricting, or do they have to call one immediately after that? Either way, it needs to get done.
Any pressure would, you've seen the governor on TV, she does a great job. She is standing strong against what the president is trying to do. He's trying to override the states. Remember, we are about states' power. This is not supposed to be centralized government, which is part of the problem of what we're dealing with here. Central planning and centralized government. So she's right to be standing up, and I hope she remains strong. She could use your help. Some of you may not know Axios Des Moines. There's Axios as a news source. There's a group in Des Moines for pro-masking. I can't think of the name, but they're offering $7,000 for the school districts to stand against the governor, to override and defy the governor. $7,000 for legal. So she, not only could she call this, and let me also say, I'm thrilled we have Governor Reynolds and not Fred Hubble. So I think we all understand that, but because of what I just mentioned to you, groups like that mask group coming after her, the schools were just vile last year in the way they came after her. She needs your support. I think, and others have said this to me, if she will call for an executive session, if she would do an executive order, which would greatly help, I think she would seal the election because she's putting it back on you. We trust you to make your own decisions, to raise your own family. It's not government's job to protect you, it's government's job to preserve the rights God gave you so you can protect yourself.
Look, let me address this side of the group here. Good question. If an employer offers frequent testing in lieu of the vaccine mandate, should we still file a religious exemption request?
The answer to that question really depends on whether they are abusing that. Under the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that contains the Title VII that gives you the religious exemption that requires the employer to accommodate your religious beliefs, the accommodation, which is there for your benefit, can be turned into something kind of stupid. I think I mentioned that they can wind up asking you questions that are intended to kind of judge your sincerity and whether they think your religious belief is legitimate. So the accommodation thing can turn into that. The other thing about the accommodation requirement is that the masks and things that are maybe an appropriate alternative can be used a little bit abusively. We've got one case that came into our office, and it certainly can't be the only one, where the person said, I have a religious exemption or objection to the vaccine, and the employer said, well, okay, that's fine, but we want you to test for COVID 3 times a week. And the person said, okay, that's fine. And he's thinking they're just going to wave a thermometer at his forehead. But of course they're not. They're going to shove a swab up his nose 3 times a week, which is very unpleasant. And by the way, those swabs have some material on them that is questionably carcinogenic, especially in your nasal passages. So getting your nose swabbed 3 times a week might be a little much. And if it looks like the employer is basically trying to kind of make you pay for asserting that objection, then it's inappropriate. If they want to take your thermometer, your forehead temperature every day walking into the plant, no problem at all. And that would be a very reasonable accommodation, and then I would not file a religious objection.
Another question. Did you want to comment on that? Okay, another question, Martin. So this question is, I'm tribal, and I work for a tribal casino in Iowa. The tribe is sovereign and have a bit different laws. Do I have the same rights as non-tribal entities?
I don't know. It is true that under our laws, the tribes are a separate sovereign. You know, we have our federal government, we have our state governments, and our states. Each state is a sovereign, and then we have tribes, and they're sovereign. If you're a lawyer and you want to deal with tribes, you go onto their property and you have to know their laws. I don't, but I'll tell you, they are sovereign and they're different. So if anyone has a question, I can put them in touch with lawyers who know that stuff. I'm not one of them.
That's great information. That's great. All right, Representative Jacobsen, just comment on the legislators who have signed on to that.
Sir?
Yes.
Native American is still an American, and he's or she is just as much a person as anybody else in this room.
Certainly.
I'm not arguing, I'm making a statement. That's just, I know that there's some legalese that goes back and forth so that they can have their cruddy land, you know, instead of our nice land, and, you know, that's all worked out really great for them. But something's messed up with that they can't be treated like people with our civil rights.
Say it again.
It seems like they should have civil rights the same as anybody else.
I think there's a very good chance that the Civil Rights Act protections do apply to the Native Americans. When we talk about the fact that they're sovereign, that probably doesn't mean that they don't get protections the rest of us get. It just may mean that they have a level of autonomy and can, you know, create some of their own laws and limit our intrusion into their affairs if they want to.
Okay.
So, and I'm really actually curious, it just comes to my mind right now, I don't know what the mandates, whether there are even mandates on the Native American populations. If anybody knows, I'd be really interested.
Just to recap, at the end of session, we passed a very watered down, not with a lot of teeth, but it was a bill that said that the state of Iowa can't impose a mask mandate for the school kids and in government facilities. And so that was what we were able to get a majority of votes on. And all of our local area legislators that I'm going to name supported that letter along with me. And that would include Dan Dawson, Tom Shipley, Tom Moore, David Sieg, and Matt Winchell. All of the contiguous legislators that I mentioned signed on that bill. This summer, there were 24 of us who signed the letter defending medical freedom for Iowans and a series of dubia or interrogatories to the hospitals that were trying to enforce vaccine mandates on their employees. They were Brooke Bowden, John Jacobsen, Sandy Salmon, Skylar Wheeler, Henry Stone, Tom Gerhold, Sherry Lynn Westridge, Jeff Shipley, Ann Osmondson, Mark Cisneros, Shannon Lundgren, Phil Thompson, Eddie Andrews, Terry Baxter, Steve Bradley, Dean Fisher, Tom Jennery, Brad Zahn, Dennis Guth, Jason Schultz, Jim Carlin, Jesse Green, Jeff Taylor, and Ken Rosenboom. Those are the 24 right now that have put their chins out in front and are fighting the hardest for you. But my colleagues that are all contiguous on the Republican side of the aisle, every single one of them voted with us on the ban on masks that we put in place this May, that the governor signed 45 minutes after we passed it. The kids got to take off their masks in school the following day before graduation.
I think we're probably all in agreement that this information tonight from this panel, the Q&A, the presentations have been really, really helpful to fill our hearts and our minds. I'm so encouraged just by what I hear and the fact that so many showed up on a Monday evening to be encouraged, be enlightened, get information so that we can use it for our families, for those that we... So with that, we're finished with our question. Sure, please do.
A
Okay, I don't know if the person is still here that asked about the different vitamins, herbs and vitamins and whatnot. The vitamin D, the zinc, the quercetin. Also there's K2. K2 helps the vitamin D3 get to where it needs to go in your body. And there are actually studies out there that show that you have a much higher incidence of getting symptomatic COVID if you have lower vitamin D, D3 specifically in your body circulating. And so therefore, sometimes we're taking a lot of vitamin D and depending on what form you are taking, it's not actually getting where it needs to go in your body because of that lack of K2, but we're also not taking enough of it. So during the height of COVID, I was working at a homeopathic clinic in Omaha. We had patients, nobody wore a mask in our clinic. We had patients who were told and turned away from their oncologist, saying that they were on the end of life. There was nothing at all that could be done for them. None of them got COVID. They were doing these protocols in advance. And I will say that I too tested positive for antibodies and I never got sick. I was taking 50,000 IUs of vitamin D3, if that helps anybody, and a ton of other supplements, of course. But I wanted to go ahead and answer that question because there are studies out there that correlate the two. K2.
That's a great follow-up comment after the doctor spoke. Yes.
I just wanted to make one more comment that I forgot to make earlier. I might have mentioned that the accommodation thing is necessary under the Civil Rights Act, but it's really, really weak because among other things, the employer does not have to accommodate you, or the school or whoever subject to it does not have to accommodate you if accommodation would create a danger to the workforce. So obviously that's going to be an argument that gets a lot of traction. And it really underscores my own belief, and I'm a lawyer, I make my living pushing laws and working with them. The solution to this problem is not going to be the law. The solution is for people to exercise their voices and their numbers, and you have to do it.
So I don't think we covered it tonight, but CNN, who is never going to say anything for our benefit, on the side of conservatives, noted that there are 5, I think, states where 12 to 15-year-olds can make their own decisions on the vaccines. Iowa was listed as one of those states. They leave it up to the vaccine provider. So maybe, I don't have the full extent on that, but maybe that's something the legislator needs to look at, but you guys need to be aware of that. Be very, very careful. We've already had issues with 12-year-old going to the doctor and parents not getting information from the doctor, so I just want to warn you of that. And then I want to say to you this. When it looks like things are out of control, Afghanistan, COVID, the southern border, whatever it is, A.W. Tozer reminds us that there is still a God behind the scenes and he's still in authority, and he has not surrendered his authority. And so your founding fathers trusted that same God, and he answered their prayers for security, for providence, for protection, for direction, and he's still on the throne today. He's waiting to answer our prayers when we ask. And the founding fathers who gave us a nation, it's now our turn to save a nation. And that same God is there. So thank you.
Thank you all for your expertise, your input in this program tonight. And let's give our panel one more hand of appreciation. Please also thank Chris Rainey. She's the facilitator. She put everything together, organization.
Thanks, guys. Listen, I know it's late. We started out with 3 speakers, and about 3 days ago, we ended up with 5, but who could turn any of these away, right? So I want to try and get you out of here real quick. So you've heard a lot of information. I feel like we've really armed you with that, and so you've got a lot of what and why and where. But what I'm here to tell you about is what's next. So, John and Martin and a lot of people are fighting for us on behalf of this specific issue, but they can't do it alone. And so what I'm here to talk to you about is what to do next. So we've got resources on contacting the representatives and other elected officials in the back, as Lonnie mentioned. It's also on our website. If you happen to be from Nebraska, There's all kinds of information out there. We'll maybe try and get that uploaded to our website as well. But you need to email, call, write, whatever you can do just to voice your opinion on this issue. Because if John's got 500 people knocking on Governor Reynolds' door about this issue, he's going to have a lot more oomph behind his his petition. So please, we've got t-shirts for sale. It's one of the ways we fundraise to help pay for the expense. I spent $150 today on photocopies today just for this event, so we just need some help with expenses. So anything you can do with t-shirts. Donations, we've got a couple ways to donate. $5 helps, whatever you got. We've got a text to give option. You can donate through credit card at the t-shirt table. We take cash donations. We are a nonprofit organization, and so any of your donations will be tax deductible. So anything you can do to help us out would be awesome, because we're trying to help magnify and be a voice for our community. Future events. At our information table, I've got a card that looks like this, and it's got future events. We're going to do a couple more town halls like this, and we're going to pick some really mild, calm issues that aren't really going to get people upset. Our next one is about election integrity. That should be fun. And then we're also going to talk about shutdowns, because we expect that we'll probably be facing more shutdowns in the coming months. And so we just want to kind of be preemptive and talk about that. And then this fall, we're doing a banquet, which is kind of our big event, just kind of celebrating who we are and getting the word out about what we're doing. Also, there are representatives from Turning Point USA, which, go Kate. I'm partial to Kate. I was her Sunday school teacher, so she's kind of special to me. But she's representing them here, and so if you've got college kids or college kids that are struggling with this issue, she's going to be a resource for you. We have Informed Choice of Iowa. They've been kind of fighting these issues for a long time. They've got some brochures at the back of the table. They've got all kinds of resources as well. We have Missy Murphy's back there. She's got some alternative health information. She's hosting a webinar that you can participate in that might be helpful. I think she's going to talk about a lot of the stuff, Kristin, that you've talked about. And then all of our speakers, we'll put contact information for them on our websites. You can go to our website. Any questions you have about anything, you can email me. It's chris@freespeechamerica.org, and we will get your questions routed to the correct people and then hopefully get back to you on that. So I just want to thank you for coming tonight. Love that you showed up. I want you all to know there was a protest rally at UNMC today. I think about 500 people attended. And so I'm just here to say we got to stand up and we got to fight for our freedoms. I'm one of the healthcare workers. I'm expecting high likelihood of losing my job because I choose not to take the vaccine, so I'm kind of right in the same boat with a lot of you. American Brotherhood by Claude Bernardin. I went to Gettysburg one cold October night, to Devil's Den after hours, under a moon and starlit sky. I stood so silent, held my breath, and heard the melancholy sighs of history's regrets. But freedom always comes at a cost, and that night I felt the pressure, weighing dark and heavy upon my solemn chest. I tell you this so you will know, I don't even take lightly a patriot's death. The courage, the toll, the honor, the soul that each soldier and their family must sow. But we must defend our faith, our flag, our Constitution, against dishonor, attack, and lawlessness. Defamed? Dear patriots, my patriots, we are all one and the same. So stand up tall, head held high with pride, and love for this great land. Today we stand in historic times. Each soldier, woman and man, we will be tested and we will be damned. We will unite and restore the voice of freedom, shoulder to shoulder, American brotherhood, hand in hand. We are moving on to better dreams and will restore the rights and faith of every man.